welcome. Actually, every year at this moment, I'm very excited, to get the opportunity to support. I think it's a relative small number of students to work for a higher level of USNCO, the national exam, right? So I want to, briefly introduce, this prep class, the scope, the style, the contents, the difficulty, and then feel free to, stop me if you have any question, okay? Since, it's a relatively small class, feel free to just jump in and you don't have to type. But if you prefer to type your questions, it's fine. I will, check the chat, okay? Great. First, since, we are working on USNCO, we definitely should know, the exam, right? You all know the USNCO, all of the multiple choices questions are relative standard. That means they assess you 10 topics every year, right? So there are 6 multiple choice questions in each topic. And some of the questions are highly, repeatable. So which means it was assessed every year, pretty much, right? I call learning objective because, I summarize, a full list of learning objective. I believe many of you already saw my list. I will share that with you again later. But since, there are only 6 multiple choice questions under each topic, there are definitely more than 6 learning objectives, right? So that means some of the learning objectives will be assessed in a rotating basis. Maybe it was assessed this year, but it might not be assessed in the following years, right? But when we do the preparation, we definitely need to go through all of them, right? Because we cannot say, oh, I'm lucky, something I don't know will not be assessed, right? And also, you probably realize for each answer choice, A, B, C, D, there's only one correct answer, but all of the other 3 are here for a particular reason. And typically, it will be the results of a specific mistake you might make, right? So that means they are not, randomly, make up some wrong answer choices there, right? They already think about what kind of mistake you might make and then lead you to a wrong answer. And typically, if this is the case, unless you figure out the mistake, you cannot really find the mistake by reviewing, because you will directly follow your initial idea and then double check your calculation or your thinking, and you get the same, wrong answer, right? So I think this is one of the challenges of the USNCO, both the local and the national part 1. Yeah, and also the last one, I think you can clearly see there's a significant increasement in the difficulty in the most recent years, both in the local and in the national part 1, right? And there are some very new type of questions, right? We never saw them before. We probably never expect them before, right? Those questions are really assessing your conceptual understanding, your solid background in math, and your problem solving skills, right? I think it is a combination of multiple skills. So this is the characters of the MCQ questions. Next, I would like to briefly compare the national part 1 versus the local exam. First, the time is shorter, right? 90 minutes. I know the local exam is not necessary to be 110 minutes because in different areas, you may use different strategy. But in general, right, you can see the same amount of questions, but 20 minutes less is a significant decreasement. So you have to use your time wisely, because a hard question is 1 point, an easy question is also 1 point, right? There are many more complicated computations in the national exam, which requires you to have a solid background in pre-calculus. When I say pre-calculus is typically the USNCO will not ask you to use calculus knowledge or skills to solve problems. Typically, in most, I would say 99.9%, right? There might be 1 or 2 questions in the past 10 years. If you have the calculus background, it might be helpful, but even you don't have, you can still solve it, right? You will see a lot of examples later, okay? And then there are a bunch of more advanced conceptual understanding. That means the contents are getting much deeper, especially in thermodynamics, in kinetics, in equilibrium, and also in electrochemistry. right? Lastly, there are more advanced, harder descriptive chemistry, basically the reactions, right? Properties of elements, compounds, and also organic chemistry, which means you have to learn more. I know, organic chemistry and descriptive is always the two hot topics for most of you because they are beyond the scope of AP chemistry, right? But for the national, you cannot say, oh, I can simply skip that, right? That would be very hard for you. And it will make you less competitive. For example, iodometry, it was assessed in the most recent year for local and national Power 1, right? This is obviously a more advanced topic. And in organic chemistry, the new direction is to assess the relationship, your understanding about structures and the reactivities, because we always say reactivities are determined by structures, right? And how they are related. And also some spectroscopy, aldo condensation reactions, acetyl, hemiacetyl, so kind of weird names. They are not common. They are not even common in the first year of college level organic chemistry, right? They are kind of in the second semester of organic chemistry. And also they are not some typical reactions, right? But they were in the USNCO, especially in the national, right? In 2021, the USNCO had some kind of good data comparison between the local exam and the national Power 1. Because that year, everything was online, right? It's the kind of the peak of the pandemic. So as you can see from the left figure, there are, I don't know how many students in total, probably several thousand students took the virtual local exam. So this is why the ACS, the USNCO headquarters, got some statistics, right? In the other years, because the local exam was distributed to each local section, right? So typically we don't have the data. So you can clearly see if you pure guess, the average is supposed to be 15 points, right? 1/4 times 60, right? But the mean in 2021 local exam, the LSE is local section exam, is about 31, right? So 50%. And then the national Power 1 in 2021, the mean is also 31. But it doesn't mean they have the same difficulty, right? Don't forget, the national exam takers are actually the top students from the local exam, right? So actually, there is a significant, elevation of the difficulty. So according to the test writer, so if we compare the students in the right side, so those around 1,000 students, obviously they all took the local exam. So their average performance in the local and the national, there are a 12 points difference. The USNCO national Power 1 is 12 points harder than the local section exam, which means averagely they score 12 points lower than their performance in the local exam. Think about if we follow the average, now say if you score in 50 in the local, then you may expect 40 or even lower in the national, right? Although this is not always true for everyone, right? But averagely, you should expect such a difference, right?
So you're saying that the average score for people, so like the average local score for people who qualified for nationals is 42 approximately.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. Yeah, I think so. And also, if you have a look at the highest scores, right? National Power 1, the highest, it seems like it's 59, right? 59. And there are maybe 1 or 2 students. I think it's about 2 students. So which means if you score higher than 50, the Power 1 is already pretty much in the top 20, right? In Power 1, if we only consider Power 1. So if you score higher than 50, you are already the top 20 student in the whole nation, right? And also, how are the national awards determined? We never get any official information or conclusion from the website. but we all believe there are some, formula used by the USNCO. So before 2021, the equations are here. You guys can have a look. It's pretty interesting. They use, a very different way to determine the honors, high honors, and the study camp, right? In part one, the original score is 60. After you multiply by 1.25, it is 75 points. Part two, the original score is 100 points, right? Part three, the original score is 50 points. So after times 0.5, it gives you 25. So in total, it's 200 points. But obviously, not everyone's part 1, 2, 3 are counted, right? When they determine the honor, high honor, and the study camp. So this is also why every year, the number of students who got an honor vary a little bit. Sometimes it's 146, sometimes it's 151, but it's around 150 students because they need to find a cutoff, right? But it's not, the cutoff may not give you a perfect number of 150 students, right? So starting from 2021, it seems like there are some changes. So in the past, if your goal is only honors, you only need to take care of your part 1, right? But now it seems like both part 1 and part 2 will determine the honor and the high honor. So I feel I have some kind of internal pictures from the test writers, but due to some limitation, I cannot directly put here to show you guys. But I believe there is a cutoff for part 1. There is also a cutoff for part 2. So that means if you score pretty high in part 1 but very low in part 2, you might disqualify to get the honors. That's possible.
So if you got like a decent score in let's say you got a decent score in both part 1 and part 2 and you got into honors. So then what would your part 1 score approximately be?
Yeah, I will talk about that later. So according to the test writer, 30 points in the national part 1 is the average. Actually, it's pretty good, considering the difficulty of the test, right? And 40 out of 60 should be competitive for honors. And based on the data in 2021, you should score at least 55 points in part 2 to get the honors. Even your part 1 is much higher than 40. You still have a kind of cutoff in part 2. Does this make sense to you guys? I think the general idea is clear, right? 45, right. Next level, it will be competitive for high honors, but obviously there is also a cutoff for your part 2, right? To get it into the high honor. And 50, as I mentioned, from the part 1 itself is already in the top 20, right? So it's competitive for the study camp.
So if I got a 40 plus 55, that would probably be an honor?
Yeah.
Okay.
That is in 2021. Obviously, the cutoff varies every year, right? So it's hard for us to use this in 2023 or in the following years. But if you try the 2021, you should get a general idea about how hard it is.
Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm. No problem. So my strategies for this class, first, I want to focus on problem solving. The main goal is to boost your performance in the exams, both in part 1, 2, and 3. But I probably will spend 70% to talk about part 1 to help you prepare part 1, because I think that is the first step, right? I believe, preparing part 1 will also be helpful for you to prepare part 2. They're not conflicting with each other, right? So about 20% of time will be used for part 2. And then I will use, some time to give you some, introduction about how to work on part 3. But to be honest, part 3 is lab, right? Is lab. So we can talk about that because the majority of the points are still related to your writing. It's not really related to how well you finish the labs. Okay. So that means I'm going to make some changes. This schedule might be different from what I posted in my website. I want to focus on problem solving. And also I want to provide a very detailed, profounding, that means very deep and educational explanations to the most recent years of USNCO, at least the national part one. If we have more time, we can also talk about the part two. But for part two, the easy thing is they have a relative detailed, answer key, right? So that means, we definitely can further extend and can further explain, but part one will be harder for you to prepare independently, right? Even we already provided all of the detailed annotations, but still reading the annotations can help you, but sometimes it may not give you the very insightful understanding. That is, my work. I want to help you guys, promote your deep understanding here. So for that means for non-computation based questions, you understand each answer choice, why this one is right, why the other three are incorrect. For computation questions, you know how to use your math to solve a problem. And after that, you can also stand in a higher position to look down this question and fully understand what is the principle of the question. So I want to make this class a little bit more interactive. So I really appreciate, your active participation. You ask questions, you answer questions as well. So we'll combine, class discussion, text interaction and some polls, and also probably some Kahoot games to make the class more interactive and you guys are more engaged. Because, I taught 2 years, pretty much 2 years, virtual classes in 2021 and in 2022, it was tough, right? I believe, most of you probably also suffered from this process with a certain period of time. So it's challenging, right? So unfortunately, we are a, virtual class. So it's hard for you to pay full attention for 90 minutes all the time, right? So this is why I want to make it more interactive. Please also remind yourself, right, to, focus a little bit more, try your best. Lastly, I want to provide 3 mock exams. 2 of them will be part 1 mocks, and the last one will be part 2 mocks. So they will be provided after the first, the third, and the 6th sessions, respectively, which means after the class today, I will give you a link in Google Classroom. There will be a mock test in a Google survey, style. You definitely need to, get the scratch paper. You need to, write down your work, and then, but when you submit, you just submit in the Google form. Okay. It will be 30 multiple choice questions. I expect you to finish in 50 minutes, but I think the time is not that critical for our first trial. My goal is for you to finish it first. Okay. Try your best to finish it. But if you want to time yourself, I would say 50 minutes is a kind of fair timing. So typically my marks are not novel as the USNCO national, but it will be a little bit more challenging than the questions. So which means after you practice those questions and then you further work on my marks, and then if you can get most of them, I would say you got a pretty good understanding when you work on the questions initially. Right?
Can I ask, is there any specific year that I should avoid doing those mock exams?
No. For example, my first mock will be based on National 2021. That is something I'm going to discuss with you today. And then you are supposed, that my next, I will talk about that later.
Okay.
So you don't have to avoid anything. You can do whatever you like.
Yeah, for like on my own practice, I can do.
Yeah. So
the
you
mock
can
exam
practice any year you like. Yeah. So even for my mock, I'm not using the same questions. I want you to finish those questions first, and then you try my mock.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah. Because my mocks are typically a little bit more challenging, and there will be a deeper conceptual understanding or more complicated computations involved.
Okay.
Okay, you guys all know the 10 topics, right? We don't need to talk about that. Typically, the difficulty of the national part 1 is like this. There will be 1 to 2 easy questions. That means, the average will be relatively high, and there will be 3 to 4 medium questions. There will be 1 to 2 hard questions. So my focus will be the easier and medium questions. That means if you don't make silly mistakes, you should be able to get 40 out of 60, right? And 40 actually is pretty competitive for you to be in the honors, awards, right? And it doesn't mean you need to skip the hard questions, right? But it not be my focus. You definitely will talk about some of them, but if you feel that's too hard for you to reach, it's totally fine, right? It's totally fine. And combining some reasonable guess, sometimes choosing between one of the two answer choices, I believe you can get some of them, right? Even you are not quite sure about what is the correct answer.
Dr. Chen,
Yeah.
we'll still receive some training on the hard questions, right?
Oh yeah, that for sure.
I'm because when I did the mock 2015 to 2020, I got scores of about 40. So
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And I would say get 40 doesn't mean you fully understand that 40 for most of the cases. So what I want to do is to deepen your understanding of that 40, and hopefully I can also help you to work on the other 20. Okay. So who will be benefiting the most from the class? I hope everyone will get a good benefit, but I still want to emphasize who will benefit the most. First, you should practice the national part 1 and 2 like real exams, right? That means you time yourself, you give yourself 90 minutes, you fully focus, you try to finish in a one-time block of 90 minutes. Right now, oh, I finished 6 today, I try another 6 tomorrow. That doesn't work, right? You need to focus, time yourself, give yourself, I would say it's more like a struggle feeling. You need to practice the struggling, right? Because when you take the national exam in the real, situation, you will be struggling. Trust me, right? Because you feel, wow, the questions are so hard, right? And I'm not sure. I'm not sure a lot of questions. So you need to practice that. That will give you, the best sense how you can score higher in the real national. And for any computation-based questions, I need you to show your forework. So I posted all of the single column national part 1 test paper in Google Classroom. I strongly recommend you print those test paper and show your work in the right side or in the left side, the blank side, right? So I emphasize computation-based questions for 2 reasons. First, it's good for you to review. Secondly, if you got a results which is not one of the answer choice, and then you know how to get back, you can check your work rather than, oh, I start over again. That is a big waste of time, right? So it's important for you to show your forework. Check the annotations, obviously, right? If you find any bugs, please email me. I already, find about 10 bugs in the published work. So I will try to update them, after we finish this class. Hopefully I can get a little bit more. I will, publish a list in Google Classroom for you to know what are the bugs I already, realized, okay? To test corrections. That means, after you finish grading, you got 40, right? Think about out of the 40, there might be a few, you made a good guess, right? But that doesn't mean you fully understand the question. And for the other 20, obviously, solve them one by one. Check annotations, do some research, ask questions, email me, or I will make a Zoom chat after the class today. So if you have any question, feel free to raise your question there, okay? Secondly, students who participate in the class actively, take notes, ask questions, review the contents, right? This definitely is important, right? Lastly, I would say this class definitely is not for everyone, right? You need to have a decent background. So I would say if you score 45 to 55 in the most recent locals, are ideal for this class. You'll be benefiting the most from this class. If you are score lower than 40 in the most recent local, probably this class might be too challenging for you. If you score higher than 55, you definitely can still get some, because you're already in the higher level. It's hard for you to further improve because sometimes there are some misconceptions, but you didn't realize, right? So in general, 45 to 55, I hope most of you are in this category. If you are not, just let me know, right? Okay. Oh, so lastly, the learning objectives I summarized. I spent a lot of time in summarizing those learning objectives. So I believe it would be helpful for you guys to prepare your national exams. So you can go to my website, teacher.us, find the learning objectives, or you can scan the QR code here. And I will post, a PDF documents in Google Classroom for you guys to check. If you want to print it and take notes and do some check marks, which one I need to do some further reading, which one I already have a good understanding. Okay, great guys. That is the brief introduction. Before we start the discussion today, do you have any other questions?